board. And the relationship of the board to the larger organization has, of course, been controversial to the point where many would describe it as extremely unhealthy, given that at least the last two CEOs have come in from the board and so on. So what is shifting fundamentally? What can the community anticipate might have shifted fundamentally to prevent something like this happening? Obviously, in this case now, we have someone who's actually from healthcare, with the qualifications to lead a healthcare organization, but that has not been the case before. And it seems like the board has been in turmoil. The relationship between the board and the CEO has always been conflicted, unhealthy at times. Has anything changed significantly, or are there plans to make significant changes? Did that come about while making this decision?
I'll start, and then if you want to add, I think if you look back historically, and if you really want to get down to brass tacks, to use your term, when Jamal Edwards was hired as our CEO, he was not on the board. He was a special advisor to the board that was volunteering his time per a request that we had made to his law firm. I was not on the board at the time, so I can't speak to the motivations, but I think if you look back, let's call it a spade, it was an organization in crisis, and when someone raised their hand and said, I'll help steer the ship, I certainly can't fault the then board, which really no longer exists anymore, for having made that decision, not knowing any more than they did. So that's all I'll say about that. And then as it relates to the hire of Karma, not to get into any more detail because I know we've gone through this, but she was someone who knew the organization really well. And I'll say at the time, we didn't anticipate that she would be an interim for 18 months. We fully anticipated that she would play an interim role for a series of months, and then we would transition into a new executive. So it looks as though we hired a CEO from the board, when in fact it was truly meant to be an interim, several months of stewardship, and then passing that to someone like David, who was recruited. What has changed, which is probably the most important part of that question, is we made a commitment to the community 18 months ago that we would go through a very deliberate and professionally led and nationally recruited process to find a leader in healthcare like we have in David. And I serve not only as chairman of the board, but I also serve as chairman of the recruiting committee, which was made up of not only board members, but also members of the community and patients. I was very apprehensive, to be very candid, because I know how hard it is to hire someone that the community would accept as our leader, and that our patients would respect as our leader, and that as our staff would really be inspired by. And those three things really weighed on me when we started the process. And I didn't know where we were going to end, because I know how hard that role really is. I had known David through other professional activities. I was, as board chair, had worked with AFC and their board chair on a number of initiatives and other agencies. And when I saw David's name among the candidates list, I breathed a massive sigh of relief. Not saying that I knew immediately that he was the obvious candidate, because I really didn't know anyone else in the mix at the time, but I knew that there was someone who I could find a lot of immediate faith in. I was like, God, worst case scenario, we even have David, and I mean that in a very positive way. And of course, throughout the entire recruiting process, which was handled by Kittleman and Associates, David continually knocked it out of the park as it related to his understanding of the ACA, his understanding of the agency, his understanding of Chicago dynamics. It's still a city that you need to understand, I think, to operate well in. So I think what changed is our approach to hiring. We did everything we could to do it right. And I think that's really important. And while I in many ways would love to have been, introducing David to you as our CEO 12 months ago, like we had originally thought we would be able to, and that's a different conversation I think we've already had. But I think the idea is that this process has been one that was structured, and I think has netted us out to a pretty great result. And I think at this stage, let me finish by saying, I think as we've represented to David a number of times as a board, we are very ready, I think, as a board to take a step back and put the organization wholly in the hands of an executive like David. We have had to be involved deeply in the organization in the last, I think, 18 months as a board, and we've had an incredible level of commitment, and thankfully we have a great board right now made of really great professionals in their own right. But now is the time that, the day of the elves has expired. It's time for the day of men now.
Can I just follow up with you real quick? I've been really blessed to have an incredible board at AIDS Foundation of Chicago, and through that experience, have worked on board development, board recruitment, board onboarding, board engagement, making sure that we can, things that I hope to bring to Howard Brown to make sure that the board is utilized for high-level strategy and their fiduciary responsibilities, fundraising, of course, fiscal management, but in the big strategic role that boards have to play. We have requirements as a federally qualified health center around the composition of the board. So there's going to be some recruitment that we need to do to fully fulfill those requirements. But I'm excited to work with the board so that the management team can implement its strategy, and that the board can do its fiduciary responsibilities and govern. And so I think because of the history of the organization, that's different things have been required at different boards. But I hope we can get back to this careful equilibrium, which is really healthy for a nonprofit organization and necessary.
Can you say a little bit about the current staff of Howard Brown? And I know they'll be reading this with high anticipation of what the timeline is for after April 1st or even before their own jobs. They've so often had lack of communication.
Yeah. And we've also, right.
Yeah, I mean, they constantly come to us to find out answers about what's going on at the agency that they don't hear about. The transparency is both internally problematic and externally problematic, I would tell you.
And also there were a series of, and that's sort of piggybacking on it, there were a series of dismissals recently. Was that in any way motivated by having David come in? And was that in any way attached to your stepping in as CEO? Or was that something that the board or other components of Howard Brown decided upon?
Well, I mean,
two separate questions.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say is, having still running until the end of March, AIDS Foundation Chicago. It's just good practice not to talk about personnel issue. I know you get that answer all the time, but it is really good practice because it's so important for to fulfill the bond of confidentiality that the organization has with not only its current staff, but its past employees and future employees. I mean, I think we want to create a work environment where people feel that their performance and their employment status is only negotiated, but with their supervisor.
Sacrosanct.
And so I'm very concerned about making sure that we fulfill that. We know it's very difficult because we know that sometimes people want to talk about personnel decisions, and oftentimes you can't get the full picture, nor is it I think healthy for the workforce for all that to be aired. That said, I mean, your direct question about I'm excited to meet many of the people I've not met through my vetting process. It's a big organization to learn. It's certainly bigger than the AIDS Foundation Chicago in terms of workforce. 3 service sites and three retail operations. So I'm gonna really dedicate the first part of my term to understanding and meeting and learning from the great people at Howard Brown. I mean, I'm coming in with a fresh eye, and I will be learning. I mean, we'll be learning because my skill set has been in particular areas, and there's some areas of Howard Brown's work that I've not had to engage with before. I'm not afraid of smart people. I actually really thrive on people who are committed and bring their full self, including their big brains, to their work. So, and the folks that I've met so far have been really fantastic. And I expect that I'll meet a lot more really fantastic people. I know a lot of people on the HIV side of the practice, but I know there's a lot of people, including like the retail workforce, I've not met yet. So getting to them and also the patient. I mean, I guess I need to figure out strategies to introduce myself to the people that are coming through the doors, and make sure that their experience from, doorstep to what they need and back is excellent, because everybody in that chain is part of the delivery of care.
How would you, what would you describe as your vision for Howard Brown in light of, obviously, the landscape of healthcare, but also in light of the organization's history and moving forward? Yeah,
well, I think I have kind of two important visions to realize. One is to meet the highest standards of a community-based healthcare clinic. We right now have a designation from the federal government that's called Federally Qualified Health Center Lookalike. So we have all the requirements and none of the financial incentives. Not only is it important for the operation of Howard Brown to be a full grant-earning federally qualified health center, but it's also a stamp of approval. So it's the federal government says that they have thoroughly assessed your strategies in the community, and and determined that you are meeting all those standards. And then obviously you have to continue to demonstrate that you earn that designation. But that is an important goal of mine for the organization. It's a part of maturing the organization and demonstrating that we can provide good care. Part of that mission, sort of a separate track, but it's related, is earning accreditation as a patient-centered medical home, which is another way of demonstrating the quality of services that we provide our patients and clients. And work is already well underway to position the organization for that accreditation. So that's exciting, and I'm going to learn more about this and figure out how to support that. And then I think the organization has to meet the highest standards of nonprofit operations. So rebuilding the financial stability of the organization so we can be more nimble and more responsive to community needs, requires having a good business plan. I mean, so improving kind of the operation, but the kind of the financial health of the organization is an enormous goal, because as we find gaps in our community, that we should be doing more on in this service line or in this community or for this population, we're going to need the ability to respond. And you can't do that when you're struggling to make payroll or when there's resource crunches. So building the fiscal health of the organization and putting in place the structures for sustainability is so really the two goals are really making sure that we can be positioned as a fully grant-earning, federally qualified health center and being a strong nonprofit. I mean, that's where I want to go. I mean, they're not sexy and important, but they're all about making sure that we can serve.
They're also not very personal. Can you talk a little bit about being, as a Latino gay man, living with HIV, what this is a personal challenge.
Oh,
and you're also a marathoner. So, this had to have some personal elements for you beyond the fact that you received your HIV diagnosis 20 years ago at the clinic. What was that for you, like, challenge-wise, to make this decision personally?
Oh, well, I guess I want to be clear that, for me, it's all intertwined. Mm-hmm. I mean, so, and I've, one thing that's been fantastic about being at AIDS Foundation Chicago is all my identities can coexist. I can be an advocate, an activist, and a nonprofit professional without having to, hide any part of my identity. So absolutely, I mean, I think, being a Latino gay man living with HIV is at the core of why I believe so passionately in social justice. So many people are harmed by stigma, by racism, by xenophobia. Harmed. I mean, I see it. One of my dear friends who died in 1986. It's actually really tragic. He died of HIV/AIDS, probably 27, 28 years old, immigrant from Mexico. Everyone knew him as Luis. We'll just say that, Luis. And when we buried him and his sister came from Mexico, we found out that, in fact, his name at birth was not Luis. It was another name. He had to assume a different identity so he could get a job and get, charity care. It was so tragic. This person that we loved, that we're burying, had to conceal his entire identity, change his whole being, to survive, and did it. Died a very, very lonely, sad, and short, enjoyed too short a life. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's at my core. But I also believe that social justice is enabled by strong institutions. I mean, I think, the LGBTQ community deserves community-based institutions that champion our lives and our mission. And I'm thrilled that and thank you, Tracy, for your leadership, that we've crossed the barrier around marriage equality, but there's no equality without health. There's none. If you're sick and you're out of the system, guess what? You're not equal. So we're not done. I mean, this is the other part of it. I think so many, I'm sort of saddened that some people, that we mustered so much energy to Springfield and so many, in a well-deserved victory, and one we should celebrate. But we cannot, for a moment, believe that the lives of LGBT people and Q people have been forever improved. If there's not economic justice, racial, ethnic, and assistance for the poor, there's, and too many of our folks are in those conditions, and they deserve their community to rally for their well-being too. So that's at my core.